The clock hit 2:17 a.m. when the alarm rippled through Russia's most protected forest zone near Valdai, a secluded compound sitting almost exactly 300 miles between Moscow and St. Petersburg. Radar operators detected an object moving at 720 kilometers per hour. Too slow for a jet, too fast for a bird. Within seconds, 13 Pantsir S-1 systems activated, their searchlights cutting through the freezing January air. Moments later, a second alarm triggered, another object, then another. 3 long-range Ukrainian drones were closing in, each capable of traveling 1,600 kilometers without detection. Inside a sealed beige room, one of at least 3 identical command chambers Russia built between 2018 and 2024, Vladimir Putin sat behind a desk lined with 10 sharpened pencils, 3 white telephones, and a microphone positioned precisely 5 centimeters from the edge. No windows, no natural light, just silence, recycled air, and the faint hum of reinforced ventilation. For months, his security teams had rotated convoys, launched decoy flights, and even bulldozed an entire Black Sea mansion in Sochi worth an estimated $150 million to remove any trace of a predictable pattern. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the threat was not theoretical. It was real, measurable, and close. At 2:19 a.m., one drone shifted direction, gliding through the tree line, straight toward a sector previously considered unreachable. Analysts later said the moment lasted only 6 seconds, but inside the beige room, the tension stretched like a wire ready to snap. And then, the unthinkable happened. To understand why a single drone approaching a fortified forest triggered such an intense response, the broader context matters. This confrontation did not appear overnight. It is the culmination of a 3-year evolution in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, reshaping military doctrine, domestic politics, and the very psychology of the Kremlin. Since early 2024, Ukraine has transitioned from short-range quadcopters and improvised munitions to advanced long-range systems capable of traveling 1,000 to 1,600 kilometers, striking oil depots, air bases, and electronic warfare sites deep inside Russian territory. Each successful strike challenged a long-held assumption that Moscow, shielded by geography and layered defenses, was untouchable. For Putin, that illusion shattered the moment drones reached Moscow airspace in 3 consecutive nights in October 2024, forcing the closure of major airports and grounding more than 120 flights. Reuters reported that at least 8 separate regions across western Russia confronted Ukrainian drones that same month, exposing systemic weaknesses in Russian air defense coordination. By early 2025, think tanks in Europe were calling Ukraine's drone campaign the most cost-effective long-range strike program of any modern war, contrasting $30,000 drones with Russian interceptors costing up to $2 million per launch. This imbalance created a strategic and psychological shift. Historically, Russian leaders projected strength from Moscow, maintaining a visible presence inside the Kremlin or at the Novo-Ogaryovo residence. But by mid-2025, satellite imagery reviewed by analysts showed a clear pattern. The Kremlin leader was steadily relocating away from population centers toward secluded compounds surrounded by forests, lakes, and entrenched security layers. Valdai became the centerpiece of that strategy. The existence of multiple near-identical offices, revealed through meticulous investigations by outlets like Sistema, Current Time, and RFE/RL, indicated more than logistical planning. These were not ordinary government workspaces. They were replicas built to mislead, with door handles, wall seams, and furniture matched to millimeter precision. BBC analysts noted that the offices served 2 roles simultaneously, confusing foreign intelligence about Putin's movements and maintaining the illusion to Russian citizens that he remained active inside his traditional seat of power. This dual strategy highlighted a stark contrast. A state projecting stability while its leader moved through a hidden network of fortified rooms, convoys, and tunnels. The psychological divide grew wider as reports from Putin's former security officers confirmed that he rarely used phones, avoided the internet entirely, and trusted only a small circle of advisors. He operated in an information bubble, one that narrowed further as Ukraine expanded its drone reach. At the same time, Ukraine's motivation intensified. Each successful strike inside Russia sent a signal not only of capability, but of resolve. The message was unmistakable. There were no safe zones, no out-of-reach sanctuaries. Every kilometer of Russian territory had become fair game. Against this backdrop, the world began asking, if Putin's location must constantly be hidden, what does that say about the true balance of power? The escalation began quietly, almost invisibly, long before radar screens lit up over Valdai. In early 2025, Ukraine's drone operators identified a pattern. Whenever Putin appeared on state TV, subtle inconsistencies emerged. A slightly different wall seam, a door handle positioned a few centimeters higher, a missing ventilation grid. Analysts mapped these micro details to 3 separate locations: Novo Ogoriovo, Sochi, and Valdai. The discovery revealed something stunning. Putin was not simply using secure offices. He was cycling through a network designed to obscure his physical presence at all costs. The first major twist came on February 3, 2025, when Ukrainian intelligence intercepted communications indicating that Russia had rotated 4 presidential convoys in 4 different directions around Moscow simultaneously. At 21:40 that night, eyewitness videos showed identical black RS limousines, each escorted by heavy motorcades, leaving different exits of the capital. A strategy meant to confuse foreign operatives ended up revealing the extent of Russia's internal fear. According to DW, one convoy even used decoy armored buses and a fake medical van carrying signal jammers. The second twist surfaced when journalists from Current Time reviewed Kremlin press footage from late 2024. A renovation in Putin's supposed main office appeared, disappeared, and reappeared across separate recordings. Impossible unless there were multiple rooms constructed to imitate the original. Their investigation uncovered more differences. 3 types of folder binders, mismatched screw positions on identical tables, and inconsistent numbering patterns on ventilation slits. Each discrepancy was a breadcrumb leading to a deeper truth. Russia's leader spent more time hiding and staging than governing. But the third twist was the most dramatic. In March 2025, satellite imagery obtained by international observers showed 14 air defense systems, Pantsir and Tor variants, concentrated around the Valdai residence. Reuters reported that such a density of defenses typically only surrounds strategic nuclear sites or early warning radars. The configuration suggested a single priority, shielding a high-value individual from long-range drone strikes. In other words, Valdai had become the safest place in Russia, not because it was a fortress, but because it was concealed within thick forest, allowing defenses to be camouflaged under dense tree canopies. Then, the sequence of events accelerated. On October 27th, Ukraine executed a 3-night drone siege on Moscow. Flights were diverted, trains halted, and at least 11 industrial and military facilities were struck. A Russian energy plant in Oriol lost 40% capacity overnight. Within 72 hours, Russian insiders leaked that the Kremlin leader had vanished from Moscow entirely. Official footage still showed him seated in the Novo Ogoriovo office, but geolocation experts found the giveaway: a slight color shift in the wall panels not present in the real room before 2023. This deception triggered chaos across Russian ministries. Several departments reportedly received conflicting orders, one stamped from the Novo Ogoriovo office, another traced to Sochi, a third believed to originate from Valdai. The confusion slowed internal communication, prompting delays in mobilization directives and forcing emergency redeployments of short-range air defense units. Ukraine saw the confusion and escalated. By early November, Ukraine's FPV, FP-1, and Sokol drones began approaching targets deeper inside Russia. Their operators learned to blend flight paths with civilian air corridors, mimicking the speed and altitude of domestic flights. At least 9 Ukrainian drones crossed into Russia during one 48-hour period without triggering immediate interception. This led to the critical moment. The night Ukraine sent 3 long-range drones toward Valdai. 2 were decoys. Only 1 carried a payload. Russian radars caught them late. Air defense crews scrambled. Decoy convoys activated. Windows darkened across the compound. In the identical beige room, the leader of Russia waited in silence as the object approached the perimeter. For a moment, the system faltered, just 6 seconds, but long enough to spark panic inside the command corridor. The skies erupted, searchlights danced, missiles launched in rapid succession. And as the smoke settled, Moscow realized what Ukraine had truly accomplished. It wasn't the drone strike itself, it was something much larger. Ukraine had forced the Kremlin to reveal its greatest secret. The revelation of Putin's location strategy sent shockwaves far beyond the walls of Valdai. What had once been whispered speculation, duplicate offices, decoy convoys, concealed residences, was now validated by documented investigations, satellite analysis, and testimony from former Kremlin security officers. But the true impact went far deeper than the story of secret beige rooms. It redefined the strategic balance of the conflict, reshaping perceptions among Russia's elites, Ukraine's military planners, and the international community observing from Washington, Brussels, Berlin, and Beijing. Economically, the cost of maintaining this multi-layered deception was staggering. Defense News noted that each Pantsir system surrounding Valdai costs roughly $14 million, not including missiles priced at nearly $80,000 apiece. With 13 systems deployed around the residence and rotational crews operating 24/7, Russia was spending tens of millions annually just to protect one location. Add to that the logistical cost of constantly moving convoys, securing air routes, and sustaining 3 fully outfitted offices across Sochi, Novo Ogoriovo, and Valdai, and the bill soared into the hundreds of millions. Meanwhile, Russia's broader economy suffered. Reuters reported in early 2025 that Western sanctions had reduced Russia's annual federal revenue by approximately 18%, with energy export income dropping as much as $26 billion year over year. Maintaining an expanding personal security apparatus while facing declining state revenue created a strategic dilemma. Every ruble spent protecting the Kremlin leader was a ruble not invested in the war effort. Socially, the exposure of Putin's hidden movements eroded public confidence. State TV for years portrayed the Russian president as calm, stationary, and in control. Footage always showed him in the same recognizable space, the traditional Novo Ogoriovo office. But once independent media outside Russia highlighted inconsistencies, door handles shifting height, wall seams misaligned, renovations swapping inexplicably, an uncomfortable narrative formed. BBC analysis emphasized that these inconsistencies created cracks in the controlled image of stability. For citizens already concerned about drone strikes hitting fuel depots, factories, and military facilities across Belgorod, Kursk, and Tula, learning that their leader was operating from concealed forest compounds only fueled a deeper question. If he wasn't safe in Moscow, how could anyone else be? Within the military establishment, the consequences were even more significant. Jane's Defense Weekly highlighted that Russian command networks rely heavily on centralized decision-making, often requiring approvals routed directly from Putin's location. The confusion created by duplicate offices, where orders could originate from different rooms designed to appear identical, introduced delays that had real operational costs. In one instance, Western intelligence sources told reporters that a Russian counter-battery response near Kharkiv was delayed 47 minutes due to conflicting instructions traced to 2 separate command facilities. In high-tempo warfare, 47 minutes can alter the outcome of an entire front. Strategically, Ukraine capitalized on this growing instability. By demonstrating the range and precision of its long-distance drones, Kiev forced Russia to redistribute air defenses away from frontline regions to protect political targets. DW reported that by early 2025, at least 22 Pantsir systems had been pulled back from Crimea and Belgorod to cover high-priority sites deep inside Russia. This redistribution weakened Russian air defense layers near active combat zones, enabling Ukraine to increase strike frequency on ammunition depots and logistics hubs. Another key dimension emerged: information warfare. The discovery of the clone offices became a global media story. Western outlets framed it as evidence of Russia's insecurity. Ukrainian officials amplified the message, stressing that even the nation's top leader felt vulnerable to long-range penetration. This psychological framing mattered. Wars are fought with missiles and drones, but also with perception. And the perception now circulating internationally was that the Kremlin leader was increasingly isolated, shielded, and disconnected from both the public and his own military. Within Russia's power circles, the impact was even more delicate. Senior officials, oligarchs, and military elites already frustrated by economic strain watched as Putin avoided Moscow more frequently. Some saw strategic caution, others saw retreat. The center of political gravity was shifting away from the capital, a symbolic blow in a country where Moscow has always represented strength. Yet the most profound consequence wasn't financial, social, or military. It was strategic psychology. BBC and Reuters both highlighted that the Kremlin leader's limited access to outside information created a shrinking decision loop. By relying on a small circle of advisors and avoiding digital communication entirely, he insulated himself from broader perspectives. This vacuum, combined with the constant movement between identical rooms, created an environment where strategic decisions became more reactive, more cautious, and less grounded in real-time battlefield conditions. Meanwhile, Ukraine's drone campaign continued evolving, with new models under development projected to reach 2,000 kilometers by mid-2025. As Kyiv expanded its capabilities, the question facing Russia grew more explicit. How long could the Kremlin leader maintain an illusion of control while physically relocating to avoid threats? Each drone flight, each exposed inconsistency in state media footage, each leaked testimony from former security officers chipped away at a myth carefully built over 2 decades. The myth of the unshakable leader, the myth of total control, the myth of invulnerability. And now, the world was watching to see how that myth would withstand the next shockwave. As Russia scrambled to absorb the shock of Ukraine's expanding drone reach, the global landscape shifted with equal urgency. NATO intelligence centers in Ramstein, Brussels, and Norfolk began re-evaluating the strategic map. What had once been theoretical, Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory, was now operational reality. And that reality forced every major power to reconsider its assumptions about deterrence, vulnerability, and the future of long-range warfare. In Washington, the Pentagon's 2025 annual threat assessment highlighted a new category of emerging systems: autonomous long-range precision drones from non-NATO states. These were no longer hobbyist aircraft converted into weapons. Ukraine's FP-1 and Sokol families operated with ranges exceeding 1,500 kilometers, flight altitudes of 9,000 meters, and radar signatures small enough to slip past older Russian detection grids. A U.S. Air Force official quoted in recent defense news analysis compared Ukraine's drone evolution to the rapid leaps seen during the Gulf War. In 12 months, Ukraine moved from tactical disruption to strategic reach. NATO planners recognized the implications immediately. If low-cost drones could force Russia, a nuclear state with one of the world's densest air defense networks, to redistribute high-value systems away from the front lines, then the entire doctrine of fixed strategic assets was at risk. A Pantsir costs roughly $14 million, while a modern Ukrainian drone costs under $50,000. The economic imbalance was staggering. One NATO analyst calculated that for every dollar Ukraine spent on drone production, Russia spent nearly $40 attempting to intercept. European states took notice. Lithuania, Poland, the UK, and Germany accelerated their own drone defense projects, pouring an estimated $3.2 billion combined into AI-based detection systems, electromagnetic jammers, and autonomous interceptor drones. The EU's Joint Munitions Initiative projected a tripling of drone production by late 2025. In London, British intelligence confirmed that Ukraine's long-range systems had already influenced European procurement strategies more than any other battlefield trend since 2025, the war began. Meanwhile, China watched closely. Beijing had long studied Russian command structures, but the exposure of Putin's identical office system revealed an unexpected vulnerability: the challenge of maintaining centralized control under asymmetric technological pressure. Chinese military journals noted that Russia's reliance on hardened, static leadership locations, no matter how well hidden, was outdated in an era where low-cost precision weapons could bypass conventional defenses. Analysts connected these observations to China's own modernization push toward distributed command centers and hardened mobile facilities. In the Middle East, Iran took a different lesson. Tehran, already the world's largest exporter of military drones to non-state partners, began refining longer-range models inspired partly by Ukraine's success. Israeli intelligence claimed in late 2024 that Iran tested drones approaching 1,200-kilometer ranges, enough to strike U.S. assets in the Gulf or key infrastructure in southern Europe. Kyiv's achievements proved a powerful demonstration. A determined nation under pressure could rapidly scale drone capacity to strategic impact levels. For the United States, the most pressing concern was stability. President Donald Trump's administration recalibrated its posture toward both Kyiv and Moscow. While publicly pushing for negotiations, U.S. defense agencies continued supporting Ukraine's drone-related intelligence, satellite coordination, and data processing. Washington's quiet strategy became clear: increase pressure on the Kremlin without triggering unpredictable retaliation. Every long-range Ukrainian strike inside Russia had to be managed with careful timing and diplomatic messaging. 3 forward-looking scenarios circulated among NATO planners. Scenario 2: Ukrainian long-range escalation. With new models expected from Ukrainian defense companies by mid-2025, strikes could reach as far as Yekaterinburg or key military research centers near Kazan, regions previously considered out of range. Global intelligence analysts believe this might compel Russia to adopt a mobile Kremlin strategy, forcing its leadership to relocate continuously across the interior. Scenario 3: Russian aerospace response. Russia attempts to counter the drone threat through mass production of cheap interceptors and modifications to its early warning radars. However, Western think tanks estimate it would take 12 to 18 months for Russia to scale production effectively, time Moscow may not have as economic strain deepens. For Ukraine, the strategic picture was more optimistic than at any point since early 2022. Kyiv demonstrated that low-cost innovation could neutralize expensive adversary systems. NATO strategists openly described Ukraine's drone doctrine as revolutionary, reshaping expectations for future conflicts, and each successful strike carried a symbolic message. Precision, reach, and persistence mattered more than size, population, or legacy military power. As the world watched, one truth grew impossible to ignore. Ukraine's ability to expose hidden weaknesses inside Russia had transformed this conflict from a regional war into a global lesson in modern asymmetry. And the leader most impacted by that lesson was the one hiding in a windowless beige room, shielded by layers of air defenses, yet still unable to escape the widening shadow of long-range precision. The night the drones reached Valdai marked more than a tactical breakthrough. It revealed a stunning contradiction at the heart of modern Russia. The state projects unshakable strength, yet its leadership operates from a place of constant vulnerability. The beige room, sealed, silent, meticulously staged, became the symbol of that contradiction. A leader presenting confidence to millions on television, yet surrounded by 13 air defense systems concealed among trees, reacting to distant engines in the night. Across 3 years of intensifying conflict, the Kremlin built an elaborate illusion. Identical offices, decoy convoys, misdirection flights, controlled media angles, and scripted footage. But illusions work only as long as no one exposes their seams. Ukraine found those seams, and once exposed, the imagery reshaped global understanding of where power truly sits in 2025. A nation that once relied on tanks, jets, and raw mass now faced a new kind of adversary, one built on algorithms, composite wings, electric motors, and audacity. A nation that burned through billions trying to intercept drones worth a fraction of a fighter jet. A nation whose most fortified sites had become symbols of a shrinking comfort zone. In the end, the greatest change was psychological. The Kremlin leader shifted from governing a vast territory to avoiding threats within it, from projecting dominance to managing fear, from operating in iconic halls to making decisions behind windowless walls. Yet the larger story is far from over. Ukraine's drone programs continue expanding. Russia continues reinforcing. NATO continues recalibrating. China continues studying the lessons. And Washington continues balancing escalation against stability as the conflict enters another unpredictable phase. So the open questions grow sharper. Can Russia sustain a strategy that pulls air defenses inward while the front lines stretch thin? Will Ukraine's next generation of drones push deeper, forcing Moscow to evolve or retreat further into hardened compounds? And how long can a system built on illusions withstand a world that now sees its vulnerabilities in high definition? For more deep dive analysis and cinematic breakdowns of global conflict, viewers are invited to join the conversation, share their perspective, and subscribe for upcoming investigations into the shifting balance of power in 2025.